We'll now hear from Trooper John Brown, Rhode Island Troopers Association. Trooper Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to members of the task force for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Troopers Association. I'm obviously the president of the association, and I represent 213 sworn members, which are in the ranks of trooper, corporal, and sergeant. It's truly a tough act to follow after Mr. Colucci and Dr. Bousselet, but I can tell you that pretty much everything I had to say was strictly in line with their opinions and their recommendations as a result, in regards to LEOBoR. Before I go into some points, I just want to briefly speak about some numbers. A couple of meetings ago, Mr. Wardell did a great job giving the results of the survey that he conducted with the police chiefs, but I wanted to speak about the state police specifically, especially since this conversation, I think, kind of initiated with some use of force instances that were happening across the country and even locally. So I look back over 4 years, and over 4 years, the state police has had 144 use of force incidences, and in all cases, all 144 were considered justified. And that's after, over 400,000 contacts with the public over that 4 years, and numerous arrests. And speaking of strictly arrests, looking at the percentages based on force versus arrest, it's less than 1% of the time we've applied force to effect an arrest. Now, for our standards, use of force can be anything from something like an arm bar to gain compliance, the use of OC spray, taser, drawing a firearm to actually discharging a firearm, which has not occurred in that time. And I should note that the national average for that is 1.6, so we're way below the average. These low numbers, are due to many variables, from starting off with recruitment to training, and the overall culture of the state police. We hold ourselves in a high regard. So in the interest of time, like I said, some of the earlier presenters spoke on some of the same points I was going to bring up, so I'll be brief. The first point is the 2 days. Both today and a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Capezza brought up the thought of referring to suspension days as a monetary amount, because basically that's what it is. That's one of the purposes of suspension, is to withhold pay as a type of discipline. And when it comes to the state police, we're very unique in this aspect because of our schedule. We work, most of our members in the patrol division work 13-hour shifts. Many local agencies work, 8s, 8.5s, maybe a handful work 10. We also work 3 days on, 3 days off, which is different from most municipalities. So when we start comparing anything more than, the 2 days, for instance, if we start talking about 10 days, 10 days off for a Providence police officer, because I know they work a 4 and 2 8-hour shifts, versus myself, who works 3 days on, 3 days off, 13 hours each. And that costs a 10-day suspension. We're talking 50 hours. Which can be computed to a, $5,800, $5,900 for me, which is, $2,000 or so of an increase compared to a Providence officer. Not so much because I make more money per hour than them, but just on the fact that I have a schedule that I work 13 hours instead of the 8. And then I also want to take into consideration, and again, this was brought up before, days off. So with a 3 and 3 schedule, we have 3 consecutive days off where most members work overtime. In fact, we're encouraged and expected to work overtime. And at some points, the Division of State Police will actually order back members to work that overtime. whether it's, COVID response, DUI, construction details, election security right now. There's a whole host of other responsibilities that we do on an overtime basis. So taking that all together, if you had a trooper that was given a 10-day suspension, which I assume would be a 10 working day suspension, that includes 9 leave days, so that makes that 10-day suspension actually turn into 19. So that's 10 days without pay and 9 days without, that extra income. And, even if that was to happen, I assure you that, on that night, those 19 days of suspension, we're still police officers. We had a case a couple of years ago. The trooper wasn't on suspension, but he was off duty on the bike path down in South County, recognized actually a alleged rapist on the path, and took him into custody. And then, sure, that's an example, one of many that we do off duty, and that trooper was not suspended at the time, but I assure you that even if he or she was, they would have done that same thing. It's an oath that we've signed up for and have taken 24/7, not just when we're working. This portion of LEOBoR, I don't think ties the hands of the chiefs or colonels. Whether the limit is 2 or 10, they certainly can go higher, and has happened in the past. The state police has had plenty of suspensions that have been 10 days, 30 days, a year. That never went to LEOBoR because we recognized that was a adequate punishment for the alleged infraction. But what that 2 days does is allows a reasonable threshold and a layer of due process to be sure that there isn't a rush to judgment and there's no political interference when these cases arise. Especially in today's climate right now. Also, as a caveat to the state police, we have 2 other points in play. The state police exclusively has a 3-year re-enlistment, which I believe Colonel Manning talked about before, where we're basically hired 3 years at a time. And also, there's a process for that. That's kind of similar to the LEOBoR process. Should we want to challenge a removal of a member by that process? And the other part is contract language in our CBA. That allows us to grieve any demotion, discipline, suspension that we feel is not doesn't have just cause or is not the right response to the allegation. In this committee, this commission, we've talked about the timing of this LEOBoR process, and even talked about the cost. And I can show you that the grievance process, for us would be more lengthy and more expensive. The second point of the discussion was the panel, and again, I can really go into that, but I think that Dr. Boussolet and Mr. Colucci have pretty much covered all our points. We agree that the panel that's in effect right now has been sufficient. Going back to our numbers, I think it's, or maybe it's in the notes, the state police, 99% of the time, the punishment fits the crime per se, and there hasn't been any issues. So I don't see a need to fix it. I certainly welcome the different dialogue about it, but as far as we're concerned, the 3 is sufficient. The one from each side, and the neutral, who is a law enforcement or prior law enforcement officer, and not just from the criminal justice arena or someone from the general public. And And like I said, the third point is also about transparency. I can go into that as well, but all those points have already been hit. So in the interest of time, I'll skip that. So again, going back in these numbers, Mr. Wardell's numbers, it seems like this is, 96, 97% effective. State police is higher. I consider that a success. And when it comes to our livelihoods, it's about the facts and not so much the optics. I thank you again for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Troopers Association, and I can certainly answer questions if anybody had any.
Well, we certainly thank you for your presentation.